I've finished my additions to my Carthaginians. So that involved building out these units to where they're 3 ranks instead of just 2, and added 2 groups. So there's 5 groups of citizen Libyans. I also added 3 more groups of citizen Carthaginians. And then veterans, they had 3 groups. Now they have 5. And so they're all on the table. And in this particular battle, here's the right flank, veterans supported with some citizens and elephants. And they are allied with some Spaniards there, and some Celts, and then a division of Numidian cavalry. And they're facing off against all my Romans. So there's 6 legions over there, 2 Roman and 2 Italian, facing them off. So in the first turn, the Carthaginians got the first initiative. They ordered their Celts, they wanted to engage, the Gauls here, they wanted to engage in the middle. And of course the Gauls refused to move. They rolled an 11, so there they sit. The Spaniards, on the other hand, rolled a 4, so they just bolted out across the table 18 inches and engaged the 2nd Legion there. And the their light infantry threw spears or javelins and inflicted casualties. In the second half of the turn, the Romans charged. The group that charged those guys broke. These guys won and followed up. Then over here on the right flank, the other Carthaginians are just kind of holding back, but the Libyan spearmen were ordered to advance. So they advanced 1 turn and are trying to get through that gap in the woods. And then the Roman 1st Legion, this is their elite legion, occupied the hill. And then some skirmishers took the wood for the Romans. So that is the end of turn 1. And we'll move on into turn 2. The Carthaginian half, they won the initiative. The skirmishers over here charged Italian skirmishers. They destroyed the velites here, but then the unit that charged on this side were destroyed, so that kind of worked out evenly. The Spaniards moved up 1 more. Their lights inflicted a casualty on the first group of Hastati there, and then the velites continued to fight to another draw. The Gauls have moved out a turn, and the veterans here have moved up a turn. The most stunning development, though, was here on the left, where the Libyans wanted to charge up that hill. They rolled a 4, which allowed them 3 moves, which got them into contact, just barely. They won this combat and drove back part of the Roman line. It was a draw here in the middle. And then these citizens attacked the cavalry and drove them back. So they had a lot of success against the most elite group on the table for the Romans. So we'll see what the Romans can do in their half of the turn to see if they can drive these back with their stronger soldiers. The Roman half of turn 2. The cavalry here advanced and drove back the Carthaginian skirmishers. The Hastati here advanced. This group was able to, despite have odds against them, to drive back that group and their supports. This group did not make it into contact. The Gauls advanced 1 more turn, as did the veterans here in the middle. The Romans, this is Legio 3, they advanced to the crest of the hill here. But on the right, Legion number 1 fought back valiantly. They destroyed an elephant and have now engaged the supports, this Libyan phalanx. So they have significant odds there. And then this other combat that had been fought to a draw, the Romans got the upper hand. The elephant's now shaken, and they're being driven back on the rest of the Libyan division there. The only victory for the Carthaginians was this citizen group is just driving those cavalry back. They're both shaken or disordered now, and but they're losing steam. So overall, things have stabilized here on the Roman right, and things are going to start getting hot there in the middle, I think. So stay tuned for turn 3. So Roman turn 3, they got the initiative. They, Legion 1, tough fighters that they are driving back the Libyan spearmen here. The only negative is that these very stubborn, resilient citizen spearmen have driven the Roman cavalry off the table. These guys failed their order, so they didn't advance. These guys got one order off, advancing those velites, and then they failed their orders. These also failed their orders, wanting to kind of initiate contact, but in lieu of that, they threw their pylon at the Spaniards and did some damage there. These also turned into the flank of the Spaniards to kind of threaten them, and threw pila and destroyed a skirmisher unit and inflicted some casualties on the cavalry there. And a small group of velites have gone up to kind of harass that elephant. So kind of a dull turn, and the Romans just didn't have a lot of enthusiasm this turn, except on the right flank where they're doing pretty well. But we'll see what happens on the Carthaginian side of it. On the Carthaginian initiative of turn 3, here on the Carthaginian left, this large phalanx was driven back. They lost the contact. The lead phalanx is shaken, and these Romans are pressing hard, though they're at both 5 losses apiece, so they're on the close to breaking. The Triarii were not able to pursue. They just didn't have the room to do it, so they're intact. This phalanx won impressively, destroyed a unit of Principes, and have followed that up, and so they're taking on a group of Hastati. So you see that there's 3 large phalanxes against just the one of Hastati. So the extreme right flank of the Romans is in deep, deep trouble. Here in the middle, the veterans kept advancing. They got to go 12 inches this time. One of their light units charged those velites and lost. The elephant went up and only has one short range die. Threw it, rolled a 6, and so the Hastati that didn't lose, they saved it, but they still had to take a morale check, a break test. They rolled a 3, so they had to pull back disordered, and so that was a rather stunning result. The Gauls continued moving up, and one of their light units charged some velites and destroyed them, so they're off the table. And then the Spaniards moved up against the Hastati here of the Romans that are unsupported, and the Hastati basically, despite being outnumbered significantly, were able to hold their ground. But they're in some problems here, as the Allied Legion here can, if they choose, attack their flank, but they have to be careful because this veteran group of Carthaginians has yet to unleash itself. So we'll see what happens there. But overall, lots of action, and we'll move on to turn 4. On Roman turn 4, the second Allied Legion shifted to its right to be in a supporting position to the weakened flank, and that was a good thing because there was a unit of Hastati that was basically facing off these 3 blocks of Libyan spearmen, and they lost the combat and broke. So fortunately these guys are here to stop it up. This battle resulted in a draw once again. Those Carthaginians are proving very stubborn, and these Triarii are in place. Over here, those Principes charged the elephant, drove it back, disordered, and so they followed up into some citizen spearmen. And then this legion did nothing. They rolled, I think, an 11, so they did nothing. And this legion was able to move up 1 unit into a position and basically broke a unit of their cavalry. This group of Hastati is shaken, but they were able to hold their own. And then these Hastati lost their combat, were driven back, and the Spaniards chose not to follow up. Trying to consolidate. They're getting pretty beat up. And this legion over here is basically just holding its own. I'm not sure what to do because there's a whole division of veteran Carthaginians ready to pounce. So we'll see what happens in turn, the second half of the turn. Carthaginian half of turn 4. This slugfest continues to just be a draw. They've just worn each other down. Both of the Roman units are shaken. The front unit is shaken here. The back one has 5. Up here, the second Allied Legion held their ground despite the fact that this phalanx had all the momentum. These green-clad Roman allies held off the attack. And but the break test, these guys are stalwart, so they held their ground. Over here, those Principes hit the citizens and lost, but they won the break test. Nothing really else happened over here as the veterans rolled very poorly, so they weren't able to come into contact. But over here is where things really unraveled for the Romans. This is the 4th Legion, and the Gauls finally, they rolled, I think, a 4, so that gave them 3 moves. And so all their warbands, 5 warbands, 4 regular and 1 large, crashed into the 4th Legion. These guys destroyed the 2 units in front of them, Hastati and Principes. They destroyed the unit in front of them. The supporting unit took a break test, rolled a 3. They also broke. These guys, this is 1 large war band, crashed into these guys, have driven them back, and they're disordered. The cavalry, surprisingly, lost they drew with these 2 war bands, and then held their ground. They rolled an 11. So because this one group is shaken, so they had to take the morale check. The Spaniards decided not to do much. They just kind of held back on their own. And then over here, Hannibal, who's in charge of this division, has moved them up. But they didn't come very far. They just got 1 turn, so they moved up. So the Romans are hanging tough, but that development there in the middle, very, very surprising. But, you know, the Gauls, they get that one thing where they're wild fighters, so they don't get to re-roll their misses. They don't have their initial clash, so we'll see if the Romans can hang on over there. Turn 5 saw the Romans winning the initiative. The hilltop here, the Carthaginians are barely holding on. This phalanx was able to drive back 2 units from the 2nd Allied Legion. These triarii charged into the flank of this phalanx and drove it back, causing losses on them. And then finally this major melee here between 2 units of Romans and 2 phalanxes of Carthaginians. They were both shaken and exhausted, and they had to take break tests, and both of the Carthaginian blocks broke, and so they're gone. So this flank seems to be stabilizing. However, there's still a division of Numidian light cavalry here that could cause some problems. In the middle, the 3rd Legion has been checked in its attack on the veterans here. They drove back an elephant, but otherwise this line seems to be holding pretty well against the Romans. And some nail biting done at this here as the 4th Legion took on the Gauls. These 2 groups were able to hold their own, forced a break test on the large warband, and they broke, so they're gone. And the Triarii, heroes that they are, held back these 2 warbands. The cavalry was taken back by these guys, but at the same time, 1 unit is shaken, so they'll have to leave it up to their comrades in the back to carry on. And then finally, the 1st Allied Legion sent 2 units down, and they crashed into the flank of an infantry group, destroyed it, hit the cavalry, and drove them back. So all in all, things are looking a little bit more hopeful here on the Roman left flank. On the Carthaginian turn, this is Hannibal. He's the army commander, and he has this division, and they attacked this hill with mixed results. The elephant, supported by a phalanx of veterans, was driven back by the Triarii. The Triarii are proving to be very tough in this battle all across the front. This combat, 1 phalanx charged into these 2 units, and that was a draw. The citizen spearmen, again having success, they attacked the cavalry, drove them back, and now we're going to continue that contest. The Spaniards weren't able to do much. They're trying to reconsolidate, but they're pretty much a spent force, it looks like. You can see kind of a huge empty space here in the center of the table. These guys tried to charge and came up just an inch short, so they threw their pila at this group and didn't cause any casualties. The Gauls, these guys were able to charge forward, and they pushed back the 2 units that were here off the table. So this is Legio 3, or Legio 4, excuse me, and they are pretty much destroyed. 4 of the 5 infantry units are gone. They just have their lights. The Triarii are holding tough. Then up here on the hill, the veterans continued to push, and these veterans have driven back. They destroyed a unit of Hastati and have pushed through the line. So this line is breached. So the Roman center is in precarious situation, and in the background there is a division of cavalry that can exploit it. Over here, both sides seem to have fought themselves out of fighting action. The Libyans they've lost 2 of their 5 spearmen units. One here is shaken. The two others are getting there quickly. And the Numidian cavalry charged this shaken group of Principes, but it was a draw. So shaken as they are, they're still pretty formidable against the cavalry. So that was the end of turn 5, and now we'll move on to turn 6, which may be the last, if not, certainly will be the second to the last turn. Once again on turn 6, the Romans won the initiative. They continued to battle away with this phalanx, and the phalanx was successful, and they were unsuccessful, the phalanx driving them back. The Roman cavalry was able to fight off these citizens, and this Triarii, with their general attached, charge this phalanx, has driven them back, and they will continue to battle, but they're in danger of being flanked, by those 3 units there. As we move down the table, Legio II has been successful in basically destroying the Spaniards. There's just 2 elements left, and but the rest have been destroyed, so they'll have to be fleeing the field pretty soon. The Gauls have been successful in pretty much wiping out Legio IV. The Triarii, stubborn as they are, they lost again, but the break test, they just had to withdraw, but they're just one push away from having legs at the table as well. These lights destroyed the legions velites. And then here on the hilltop, Legio III, they destroyed a veteran phalanx, and they've been fighting those veterans to a standstill. Over here, the Allied Legion number 2 was successful in holding back the Libyans. The Libyans were shaken, so they had to take a break test, and they had to pull back. These Libyans, just kind of the last element on the table, are continuing to push on, but you can see that they're going to soon be isolated. And then the Numidians charged that group of Principes. They were there. It was a draw, but both were shaken, so they took a break test, had to withdraw, as did the Numidian cavalry. So the next turn will be the Carthaginian turn, and we'll see what happens in the final bound of that turn. The final half of turn 6 showed a lot of gains on the part of the Carthaginian side. Hannibal's division here, despite these guys losing, they were able to, by break tests, destroy the Triarii. The veteran unit there fought to a draw, but again, break tests, because they were shaken, forced those units back. The Spanish, despite being shaken, won their combat and drove back the Romans. The Gauls in the center completely destroyed the 4th Legion. Nobody's left. They annihilated them. And then, to kind of seal the deal, this cavalry division is now moving forward into that gap and can go left or right to turn the flank and really cause a lot of havoc. Up here on the hill, this veteran division didn't win, but it didn't lose either. So they've kind of fought these guys to a standstill. And that's Legion 3. So they're going to have to decide what they want to do. They're kind of the healthiest legion left on the table. And then over here on the extreme right flank, or left flank of the Carthaginians, the Libyans, the one phalanx over here defeated a unit of Triarii, and they broke, and so they had a sweeping advance. They used it to turn and then charge the flank of these Principes, and the most unbelievable poor dice rolling I've ever seen. Despite the fact they had 7 dice, they rolled 0 hits. And then despite only having 5s and 6s, the Romans inflicted 5 hits on the phalanx. They didn't save anything. Even with being tough fighters, they didn't get a reroll. So they lost 5-0, and they disappeared. So the Libyans are withdrawing, broken. The First Legion is basically fought out. There's 3 units left. So things on this flank have pretty much been fought to a draw. So I think I'm going to call the game here, and call it a Carthaginian victory. Hard fought, bloody contest. Lots of losses on both sides, but a very, very fun game. Lots of interesting situations, unbelievable things happened, and so I will remember this one for a while. So anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you the next time.